Now, normally when we begin a new challenge on this series, no matter how great the obstacle that lies ahead of us happens to be, we try to start things off with a sense of hope and with a sense of optimism, which is why for the beginning of this series, we are doing exactly the opposite, because nothing, or should I say no one, really kills that sense of hope and optimism quite like the man that this series is named for, the owner of the Ottawa Senators, one Eugene Melnyk. So with that, I welcome you all to my new Ottawa Senators franchise mode series right here on NHL 20. And yes, to answer your question, we have used the Senators somewhat recently on this channel, but there really was no other team that I could condemn to this horrible fate known as being owned by Eugene Melnyk, other than the team that he, of course, owns in real life. With Milbury mode, and I might accidentally say Milbury mode over Melnyk mode because it's kind of weird to have these two series back to back, but with Milbury mode, it's like, okay, let's use a team like Chicago that most people don't want to see win anytime soon because, hey, they've been amazing for the better part of the past 11 years. But with this, it had to be Ottawa. It had to be, and we've turned them into a winner in the past, and we're going to try to turn them into a winner again. However, of course, as you would expect, there are a few obstacles. Now, as per usual, the first episode of this series is going to be more of an introduction because I want to give you all the opportunity to give me your feedback, perhaps a little, couple of extra challenges that could be added in there as well. I want to give you a chance to put your own kind of spin on how this series is going to play out. So with that said, you might be asking yourself, well, what are the rules? What's the spin to this series that you want to start things off with? And as you might have expected, we are going to capitalize on Melnyk's Scrooge-like tendencies. Money is going to be the major factor in this series. Now, I took a look at the Ottawa Senators and how they're currently set up, and these numbers, there's room for negotiation, but I had it come down to this. If you look at the current contract structure of the Ottawa Senators, you have two players that are getting paid from this team. Everyone else makes quite a bit less. Those two players, of course, being Bobby Ryan, and recently Thomas Chabot signed his contract extension. He'll also be making over $8 million. I know it doesn't seem like it, but Bobby Ryan did sign this contract while he was a member of the Senators. It was his second year in Ottawa, I believe. It might actually have been the third. 15-16 would have been his third, right? But regardless, Bobby Ryan and Thomas Chabot are the only two players to really be paid. So for the most part, if someone wants to get paid in Ottawa, Melnyk's point of view has been, screw you. We don't need you. We'll get rid of you, or you can walk. So in this series, what I was thinking is that Bobby Ryan is kind of going to be the exception to the rule, and I'm going to have that $8 million that they are paying Thomas Chabot be the ceiling for what I am allowed to pay somebody. So if somebody is looking for more than $8 million per season, they're out of here. Whether or not that means we just let them go to free agency, if they're an RFA, whatever, you're not going to be making more than $8 million in a season, which is very much going to hinder our ability to sign some superstars and, of course, be able to be extremely active on the free agent market. And when it comes to paying superstars, that's not really the only way that Melnyk tends to be cheap. Overall, he tends to pay his team significantly less. And if you look at the Ottawa Senators right now, the cap floor in the NHL is $60 million, $60.2 million to be exact. Whereas the Ottawa Senators have the second lowest team budget in the NHL, just above the New Jersey Devils, who started the season with significantly higher cap hits all in all. Of course, getting rid of Taylor Hall, the likes of Andy Green, lowered that number. So the Senators were bottom feeders in that regard. Right now they sit at just over 74. It's about $74.3 million in terms of that team cap hit. So what I'm thinking here is that we look at what the cap floor is at the start of every year, and we can only spend, we're going to go with $15 million above that cap. So an internal cap for this team that I am not allowed to go over, a limitation on what I can pay our superstars, and whatever else might come to mind as well. I'm intrigued to see what you guys happen to think of, number one, the limit for the team, the individual contracts, and any other fun ideas that you guys might have to make this series as fun, interesting, and engaging as possible. But those are the main two, and we've done something like this similar on a Twitch trial run, but I really do feel as though this series is going to benefit itself more towards being on YouTube rather than Twitch, where we really do have to put that little bit of extra thought into it. So in terms of other little rules, I'm thinking, if a player wants to walk, we pretty much have to let him walk, because having to pay him more to keep him here, I don't think Melnyk would like to know that we're keeping someone around and giving him his money, Melnyk's money, to let somebody stay here who doesn't even want to be here. Invest in the team, damn it. This is the Ottawa Senators. You got to play. You got to work the concession stands. You bet your ass you're grabbing a mop after the game and you're cleaning, because this is a full team effort. Okay, maybe it's not that bad for the Sens, at least the players, the front office staff, who's to say? But yeah, we're going to have a little bit of fun with the fact that Eugene Melnyk is stingy as hell. And let's be honest, if the Senators win the cup, who's the captain of the team? Eugene. And if it's not Eugene, then he's probably the first person that you're handing the cup to. It's going to be very MLB and probably NBA style, where Melnyk's going to break the rules. He's the one that's going to get the Stanley Cup first, much like the owners in those other leagues. So, like I said, I want to know from you guys what you think of this, how this is going to play out. What we are going to do, as I typically do as well, computer trades are off. We're going to be keeping the team the same free agent-wise. There's really nobody great out there to sign. If you've been following along with the roster editing doc, you'll know that I absolutely nerfed the hell out of the free agent list. There is nobody interesting to sign. I want to see how this first season plays out with these custom and updated rosters. And to answer that question as well, will there be an editing spectacular video? I don't know. The answer is probably not, just because the editing doc is there and it's kind of easy enough to take a look at, even though there's a ton of info. But perhaps, again, if the demand is there, let me know down in the comments as well here in this video if that's something you'd be interested in. But again, these rosters will be staying the same, and we're going to see what happens in this first season. The AI is not really going to be able to make changes. We're not going to be able to make changes. We really take over this team starting with the upcoming draft. Now, elephant in the room as well. When it comes to my custom rosters, I started customizing well before the NHL trade deadline and stuff like that. So all in all, we're not going to have all of the draft picks, what they acquired for the likes of JG Pageau's not here, but we do have San Jose's first rounder, which I am excited for, and we do have 3 second rounders as well that we're going to be able to make use of. But just giving you a look at our team here, it's not great. Now, I did go through every single team in the first episode of the Winnipeg series as well, if you want to get a look at what a lot of the starting trade values look like. That's the main reason, of course, I'm running that Winnipeg series right now, was to test these rosters. But, defensively, obviously, Brandstrom, Bernard Docker, Lassie Thompson, Thomas Chabot. It's a decent core that we have built in, but then forward-wise, it's Brady Tkachuk and a lot of unknowns, especially with how medium top six forwards work this year. It's a lot of medium top six forwards, but are they actually going to develop? It's a gigantic question mark for us moving forward. So no doubt Brady Tkachuk is the main piece on this team. And you see there, in terms of being at the cap floor, we are very much at it, because I have slightly adjusted this team in terms of who we've called up and who we've sent down. And even that limit of saying, oh, okay, the cap floor is at 60, the max is at 85, you could say, hey, you're only allowed to split the difference. 75, it would basically be $15 million over the minimum every single year. But that number is certainly negotiable here before we really get into this series. Now, looking here, these are going to be the line combinations for this season. I didn't put a major emphasis on player types and, of course, line fits or anything like that, because we're trying to actively tank, of course. But it's going to be Duclair, Tierney, Tkachuk, Brown, White, Ryan. Michael Carcone gets called up. He'll be with Anisimov, and another call-up in former Bruin Jordan Schwartz, former Portland Pirate as well. Nick Paul is with Matthew Pekka and Scott Sabourin. In case that didn't, no disrespect to Scott Sabourin, but in case that tells you, what our opinion is. Thomas Chabot will be with Ron Hainsey, Mark Borowiecki with Nikita Zaitsev, and Mike Riley is going to be with Hubert Labrie, a call-up from the Baby Sens, as Craig Anderson and Anders Nilsson, of course, will be the main men there. Morgan Klimchuk is listed as a healthy scratch. However, injuries are going to be off for this first season. Could easily send Klimchuk back down, but I don't really care at this point. But obviously the AHL highlighted by guys like Balcers, Hauerluck, Brown, Slapik, Batherson, Jonathan Davidson, Josh Norris. There are some decent players, Vitaly Abramov as well, who are down in the AHL that will hopefully develop. The baby Sens should be pretty good this year. At least I'm hoping, especially, if Philip Gustafsson could improve, that would be great. But all in all, this is going to be, kind of the counterbalance to the Detroit series that also started today, which of course is more of a, fantasy option is what you would say. This isn't going to be, completely like the Los Angeles Kings series where there are a ton of rules. But in this series, I'm not going to exploit the AI a ton. I'm not going to do... more than likely not going to do like, oh yeah, it's an RFA, let's drop it down to 1 year and steal the guy. Probably not going to do that. I'm probably not going to flip high value but low level prospects who are never going to make it to AI teams for the sake of high up draft picks and stuff like that, as we get absolutely destroyed by the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 1 of this season, and that was the perfect way to start. St. Louis kicked the hell out of us, too. It's on medium scoring for the record, and then go figure, we absolutely dominate Tampa. But, like I said, I like to have this setup episode so you guys can get your input. I'm like, okay, here's what the scoring settings should be. Do you think we're at a good level or lower it a little bit? You got to look at really what the stage is with these custom rosters in terms of where these teams are. Of course, crazy results can absolutely happen. We just got absolutely crushed by Detroit. No real way to know how good they're going to be this season. They're currently in a playoff spot, but I've also seen them with these rosters be absolutely terrible. And then you have the factor of a lot of created prospects. Pretty much every guy who's projected to go in the first round that isn't in this game, I've added in. So I am really intrigued to see how this plays out, especially with these limitations and knowing that the goal of this series is to win, but of course it's to win with these extra limitations and to not exploit the hell out of the AI to do so. We talked about it before, not against having a series where we exploit the hell out of the AI. We're doing one on Patreon right now. You've heard me probably mention the Houston Apollos in other series, but yeah, not really the goal for this one. I can't believe we're this close to 500. Craig Anderson, you modern marvel. You're really hurting my chances here at one of the higher up draft picks because we just played the Florida Panthers and beat them, and Florida did not have that good of a record either. So we'll see how this all plays out. Hopefully, again, we have one of the worst records in the league. And of course, if you're interested in how I set up the custom rosters, that Winnipeg episode the first one will certainly have basically all the answers that you need. And then the question is how do certain players develop? Kind of skip throughout that series as well, and you'll see how a lot of these prospects tend to develop, especially too if you're thinking you might have set Carter Hart to be too low. Carter Hart's a really good example because I think I set him to a 79 and people are like, are you crazy? But of course with my custom rosters, the average overall of goalies is bound to be down. So a 79 is actually not too bad. For the record, I think he hit a 91 in that Winnipeg series within 2 seasons, I think. So always intrigued to see how this plays out. And of course, the ridiculous amount of work that I put into customizing and updating the rosters to get them to a point where I feel the game's more enjoyable. Certainly wish roster sharing was a thing, as the Vegas Golden Knights have fired their head coach. Go figure. That also means they've been terrible this year. Certainly wish roster sharing was a thing so you guys could get your hands on this. And to be honest, if roster sharing was a thing, I would probably have started, the editing process again with EA's most recent updates so that all the draft picks were appropriate. But, on the flip side too, EA could give us the ability to actually move draft picks on our own. That would be cool. That, it's not as if that hasn't been seen in video games before, but, sports-related video games. But anyway, that's a whole different topic of me whining about how franchise mode could be better. And Lord knows I've made enough videos about that and will continue to do so. We'll give you a quick look at the draft class here, though. For example, again, we're going off of a lot of aggregated standings and combined standings, but Alexis Lafreniere is going to go number 1, but then you have the likes of Stützle, Byfield, Drysdale, Lucas Raymond, someone added in. like Jake Sanderson. Anton Lundell is still up there. I can't necessarily stop the AI from adding in players like Daryl Wise in the first-year draft. That is something that's been mentioned before by myself, other franchise mode guys like Tactics, where it's, it would be fantastic to see us have the ability to turn off, players joining the draft in year one, or at least really the first couple of years. Second year probably wouldn't work, but at least first year draft. Let's not have any computer-generated players. But again, here I was saying I wasn't going to mention stuff like this, but here we are. Now, unfortunately, the Detroit Red Wings have managed to out-garbage us, for lack of a better term, which is honestly promising because that's how it should be. Let's take a look around the league to see how this season panned out, as Brady Tkachuk led the team in points, but we'll focus on the standings first and foremost. 28, 44, and 10 for your Ottawa Senators. Tampa wins the division and the conference. They will be playing the Buffalo Sabres in round one. Toronto will play Florida. Boston missed out, so not sure what happened to the Bruins there. That's incredibly disappointing. Montreal missed out, and then again, we and Detroit absolutely sucked. Detroit actually had one more win than we did, but we had one more win in the regulation plus overtime win category, so that sucks. We were that close to finishing 28th. Instead, we finished 27th, so they were, three other teams here that were worse than these two Atlantic Division clubs. As you get a look here, Carolina will take on the New York Islanders. Pittsburgh plays Washington because, of course, Philly missed out, which is honestly shocking. The Rangers weren't that far off, nor were Columbus, at least from Philly's pace, and then the New Jersey Devils were one of those worst teams. So the two worst teams in the league this year were in the Western Conference. I'm presuming Vegas was one of them because they fired their coach. And it appears as though St. Louis was the other because, for some reason, either St. Louis or Nashville always sucks in Season 1. But Dallas wins the division, and they will be playing the Colorado Avalanche in round one. Nashville will play Winnipeg. Of course, Minnesota and Chicago also missed out. So in the Pacific, and indeed it was Vegas, that other team that was terrible, Edmonton will play Anaheim, who somehow made it. San Jose also made it, so that absolutely sucks for us. Damn, now, and I think in that Winnipeg trial run, San Jose was absolutely horrific. I had done another trial run offline where the Senators, I wasn't controlling them, but they ended up with the first and third overall pick. And go figure, we're not going to be so lucky. San Jose actually did really well, so the way franchise mode plays out, that's a rough start for us. It's Los Angeles, Calgary, and Arizona all miss out. And again, Vegas just randomly being terrible probably screwed us. I don't know if San Jose would have been able to make it otherwise had they not had that to take advantage of. But we have top 5 lottery odds with our pick nonetheless, which is incredibly helpful, but also concerning. I mean, Lafreniere, certainly not a guarantee. Maybe we end up with Quentin Byfield. It's really tough to tell, of course, how the odds are going to go. In terms of the offense, we had the league's second worst offense behind New Jersey, who was abysmal, and then Pittsburgh, Tampa, Colorado, Florida, and Edmonton. Top 5 in offense. Highest goals against average, New Jersey. That's not really surprising. Columbus, though, their goaltending really struggled. And then we find ourselves in third. Best goaltending was actually Anaheim, so John Gibson stood on his head. Carolina, Vancouver, Toronto, and Dallas. And look at that. Montreal, good goaltending, but what are you going to do? Poor Carey Price. Let's take a look at the stats around the league here. Again, Brady Tkachuk, solid, is up to an 88, which is fantastic. And of course, you have Chris Tierney. Anthony Duclair did pretty well for our forwards. I mean, 50 points on a team this bad. It's honestly pretty good. Bobby Ryan with 49 points. 26 goals for Connor Brown. Pretty happy with that. Nick Paul had 23 points, but I mean, yeah, with how abysmal this team is and the lack of a supporting cast, it's no real surprise, of course, that things went this poorly, but pretty happy with Thomas Chabot as well with 57 points. And of course, the goaltenders, I mean, they tried. Damn it, they tried. And to have save percentages like that, given the circumstances, honestly show that had we optimized this team and been trying to win, they would have been that much better. As Patrick Kane and Nathan McKinnon tied with 103 points. Connor McDavid was the only other person to break the 100-point mark. So, case in point as to why we might want to slightly tweak the scoring to be a little bit higher. But getting Malkin, Stamkos, Kucherov, Barkov, Giroux, and Voracek, or Voracek and Giroux as it may be, or as it were, up there as well. And for the goal scoring, we see Malkin, McDavid, Ovechkin, and Kane all break 50. Great season for Zach Parise. Jesus, 42 goals. Brad Marchand with 42 as well. Best plus minus for the hell of it was Alex Killorn. The worst, Jordan Schwartz. No real surprise. Jack Hughes had a really rough season as a member of the New Jersey Devils as well. An incredibly rough season. For the defense, point leader was Erik Karlsson with 68. You had Keith Yandel, Torrey Krug, Dougie Hamilton, and Victor Hedman in your top 5. Thomas Chabot not that far off the pace. Goal-scoring king was Karlsson. Matthias Ekholm with 19. That is incredibly random. And the assist leader would have been Keith Yandel. For the goaltenders, the winningest would have been Andrei Vasilevsky with 44 wins. Good season for Peter Mrazek out of nowhere. The shutout leader, 9 for Markstrom. It's fantastic for him. And when it comes to save percentage, Allmark was terrible. Ryan Miller, elite backup. Hadobin was up there. Markstrom, even with the goal scoring where it was, you still see some lower save percentage. Markstrom is likely to win the Vezina. Carey Price was up there. For those who thought that 84 was a bit too low, still a starter and still more than capable of being a top 3 starter. John Gibson was up there as well with a 914. And for the rookie race, it is going to be Capo Kakko who wins the Calder. Shout out to Colin White. Nearly had it. Dominic Kubalik was also up there. Now, the Kings did play Turcotte. Of course, they signed him since, so there's not really much I can do. Of course, it's not totally accurate rosters to what happened, in the 1920 season, but at the very least, the AI can't immediately flip Turcotte for Capo Kakko and then cause everything to, go topsy-turvy. At least not yet. That will happen sooner rather than later. Rookie goalies outside of Ilya Samsonov. Samsonov was phenomenal. Geez, 14-2-1 in 18 appearances. So, all in all, interesting to see how this played out. San Jose doing as well as they did was certainly unexpected and certainly screwed me over. But we'll see what happens now. We just need to hope that they lose early on to the Vancouver Canucks. Let's see what happens. Praying for a San Jose loss, which means they are likely, I would say, to win the Stanley Cup. And actually, the Belleville Sens, the baby Sens, moving on. Vancouver's up 3-0 on San Jose. Fantastic. Let's see what happens here. As the Belleville Sens, I always want to say Binghamton, they are taking on the Rochester Menu Lags. They are taking on the Rochester Americans here in the first round. Rudolph Balcer's up to an 80. That's fantastic. Let's see what happens here. Game 1 goes to Rochester. Not great for the 47-win Sens. Game 2 goes to Rochester in this best of 5. Game 3, 7-2 win, so there's some life. Jonathan Davidson's crushing it right now. And Game 4, forcing Game 5. Let's just calendar sim it. Let's see what happens with the Sens moving on. No, they are not. So, a really good season there for the old baby Sens, the junior Sens, but it just doesn't pan out. The good news is San Jose was eliminated, as was Edmonton, though. So, the second round, you have Nashville, Colorado, Vancouver, and Anaheim. Over in the East, it's Carolina, Pittsburgh, Tampa, and Toronto, which this has been a really weird way for this sim to kick things off. So, again, at least some good news for us. It's going to be a relatively high pick in the teens from San Jose, but not having that be a lottery pick is, as I mentioned, an incredibly rough way to start. The conference final, you have, how did Anaheim make the conference final? And then Tampa and Pittsburgh. With 3 of those teams, I can believe that they're there, but what is going on in Anaheim? This team, again, you got some good young pieces. I don't hate the majority of their team, and Sam Steele's up to an 82, for God's sakes, but it is a marvel. Eric Goodbranson, that's the key. We've learned that in the past. Eric Goodbranson's the key. John Gibson is just standing on his head, isn't he? Oh, yeah, 937. Of course, no injuries as well. Big factor, so it shows what a good goaltender can do, I guess, unless you have an 86 overall goalie, in which case your team's going to suck and lose in the first round. But let's see what happens here. Anaheim 3 wins away from a cup final. Anaheim still 3 wins away from a cup final. I'm going to see who moves on here. Colorado now up 2-1. Get a look here. Tampa also up 2-1. It's a 2-2 split there in the West and in the East. Colorado 1 win away from the cup final, as is Pittsburgh. Colorado going to the Stanley Cup final, where they'll take on the winner of this Game 7 between Tampa and Pittsburgh, and the answer is Tampa. So Tampa survives. They'll be playing the Avalanche in the Stanley Cup final here in Season 1. A believable final, certainly, as it's a 1-1 split now. I want to see how this plays out. Colorado up 2-1. Make it 2-2. Back and forth series. Tampa grabs the lead. The Tampa Bay Lightning choke in Game 6. It's going 7. The winner of the Stanley Cup, the Tampa Bay Lightning, win it all in Season 1. No real surprise there. Now, as you can see, the minimum salary cap is a lovely $65 million. So if we were, of course, to do the 15, $80 million would be our limit. I know it's 65.7, but we'll just keep it, round it off. So we'll say 80 million would be our cap, unless you think it should be less than that. I can't imagine there would be an argument for more. So let me know what you think. Are we good with 80 million? I mean, granted, it's only 7 million under. I'm honestly, I think more people are going to argue for that lower limit. I mean, people might argue for 65, but that's a dangerous line. I need a little bit of a buffer, but I'm thinking, 5 or 10, maybe even just 5 million over the floor at 70 million for this upcoming season would be a perfect amount of challenging. So pretty much we have 3 options. We can go 5, 10, or 15 million over the limits. But of course, 15 right now, there's not that much separation between us and the maximum cap, if that is the case. So let me know what you think. Good with it one way or another. But in the meantime, again, let's look at Tampa's road to the Cup final. They swept Buffalo, they swept Toronto, and then they survived 2 Game 7s against Pittsburgh and Colorado to win it all. And for the Calder Cup, the Milwaukee Admirals beat the team that shall not be named because they shouldn't be based in Springfield. They should be in Portland, Maine. So way to go, Milwaukee. We'll actually see here what Tampa happened to look like. Steven Stamkos, good Lord. Absolutely carried that team to a cup. Kucherov as well, Braden Point, Killorn. It's the team you would expect to see. Goodrow and Coleman are there at this point. And then defensively, Hedman, McDonough, Shattenkirk, Sergachev. Of course, Shattenkirk's going to be a big free agent coming up. And then Vasilevsky wasn't perfect, but he was certainly good enough. That'll bring us to the awards. So Tampa wins their 2nd cup in franchise history after winning the President's Trophy as well. The Art Ross to Patrick Kane. Connor McDavid wins the Hart. Dougie Hamilton wins the Norris, which, had Dougie not been injured and the season not, been shortened like it was, I think Dougie Hamilton had a really good shot at winning the Norris this year. Voracek wins the Bing. Kakko the Calder. Kucherov wins the Conn Smythe. Markstrom the Vezina. Gibson the Jennings. Patrick Nemeth the Masterton. San Jose's head coach won the Jack Adams, which sounds about right. Kopitar wins the Selke. McDavid the Ted Lindsay. And the Rocket Richard to Evgeny Malkin. Down in the AHL, Evan Barrett scored the most points. He was league MVP. I think that's Mason Jobst. Mason scored the most goals. Top rookie was Evan Barrett. Top defenseman, former Boston Bruin Tommy Cross. Top goaltender, Casey DeSmith. And the MVP of the playoffs, Connor Ingram. So Season 1 comes to a close. The question now is Brady Tkachuk showing up as a 90 at the end of one season. The question now, the lottery results. Where are the Senators going to be picking in the upcoming draft? I only want the lottery results and nothing else. I don't know how far ahead we have to sim. I think it's like the 6th or the 7th. Lottery results. Come on. Can we end this episode? This introductory episode. I botched that word, but it's fine. Can we end this episode on a high note, please? Give me a Dan high note with the lottery results. I'm having to sim so many days. But if I hit sim the draft, it's going to bring us to retired players and all that. We can get to that next time. Come on. Here we go. Lottery results. It's gonna happen. Maybe the New York Rangers and Montreal Canadiens both win. The Senators are dumped to 7th. So on top of San Jose making the playoffs, humble beginnings, if not downright cruel beginnings, for the Ottawa Senators in this series, as the New York Rangers will be claiming Alexis Lafreniere and not Montreal unless something crazy happens. So with that, I will thank you all for watching and giving this first episode a chance. Again, a lot to talk about in the comments section. Let me know. Looking forward to seeing what you all have to say. And of course, in the meantime, you know the deal. If you enjoyed this video, drop it a like. Help me out a little bit. in this YouTube game. We've been doing this for far longer than I care to admit, but I do appreciate the support regardless. And of course, subscribe if you haven't already. Check out everything around the channel if you have not already done so. And Lord knows there's a lot for you to catch up on. And of course, in the description, there's everything you need to know. All the socials, the Twitch, where we stream on a nightly basis. And of course, the Patreon, where, some exclusive stuff there as well. And I thank all of my Tier 3 patrons as well. There should be a Houston episode up today as well, that previously mentioned series. I will see you all in the next one. Until then, have a good one, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.